Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a really provocative article called A Eulogy for the Center, and its claim is, well, it's a big one. It says the very foundation of American political consensus hasn't just faded away, it's been assassinated. So let's get into it.
So the article opens with this line, and wow, talk about dramatic, right? It frames the whole thing as a political obituary. It's a really powerful way to grab your attention and make it clear that, from the author's perspective, something fundamental is just gone, for good.
Okay, so that right away brings up the big question, doesn't it? What or who is the center? If we're going to understand this eulogy, we first have to figure out what exactly is supposed to be dead. And as you're about to see, the author thinks it's way more than just, being a political moderate.
All right, so let's get right to the heart of it. How does the author actually define this center that they claim has been lost?
So here's the thing. According to the article, the center isn't just about being in the middle politically. Not at all. It's described as this huge foundational American idea, a 300-year-old worldview, really. It's a mix of capitalism, democracy, liberalism, and what the author calls a soft form of Christianity. But, and this is the crucial part, all of it was built on one single, massive assumption: infinite growth. The idea that things can just keep getting bigger and better, forever.
Okay, next up, the author talks about something called an anomaly of abundance. This is basically the golden age of the center, the time when this whole belief system seemed totally unbeatable.
So the argument here is that American success wasn't just because of its great ideas. The author claims it was built on two key pillars. First, you have that ideology we just talked about: capitalism, liberalism, all that. But the second pillar, and this is super important to the argument, was access to a whole continent of what seemed like infinite natural resources, a huge material advantage that pretty much nobody else had.
And that's what this quote is getting at. The author really hammers home this point. Having all that land, all that timber, all those minerals, it was a total fluke of history, a complete anomaly. And that unique situation, the argument goes, was the perfect petri dish for an idea like infinite growth to not just start, but to really thrive.
And to show just how confident the country was in this system, the author brings up a pretty startling statistic. During World War II, the U.S. held 450,000 Nazi prisoners of war. And according to this text, the American system of abundance was so powerful, so convincing, that apparently not a single one of them even tried to sabotage the war effort. Think about that. But as the story goes, that golden age had to end. And that brings us to the next chapter, the era of scarcity. This is the turning point where the whole foundation of the center starts to fall apart. The author uses a really simple analogy to explain this. Let's call it the abundance scenario. Imagine you've got 5 pizzas for just 3 people. Is anyone going to fight? No way. There's more than enough for everybody. Sharing is easy. Everyone's happy.
But now, let's flip that. This is the scarcity scenario. You've got 1 pizza, but 10 hungry people. What happens now? Well, the author argues that all that easy cooperation just evaporates. Suddenly, it's all about competition, who gets what, and resentment starts to build. And that is the shift the article claims happened in America, from the 5-pizza world to the 1-pizza world.
And the article lays out this timeline of decline, decade by decade. It really kicks off in the 1970s, when America supposedly runs out of its own traditional oil. Then you get the 80s, the 90s, with manufacturing jobs getting shipped overseas, creating the Rust Belt. And finally, the 2010s bring the gig economy, where everyone's competing for low-wage work. Each step, according to the author, just cranked up the economic pressure on regular people. And of course, that kind of economic stress doesn't just stay in your wallet. The author claims it started to tear society apart. The middle class got hollowed out. College grads found themselves buried in debt with no good jobs. And as everyone started fighting over a smaller and smaller piece of the pie, you see things like racial tensions flare up. At the same time, the internet comes along and gives everyone a voice, which starts to challenge the old way of doing things.
So all of this decline, this fracturing, it all builds to the climax of the story, the moment the author calls the assassination of the center. Now, this is a fictional event, but it's meant to be a really powerful symbol for the final, violent end of this idea.
And the author doesn't just talk about it in abstract terms. They give it a date, September 10th, 2025. A bullet through the neck. It's so specific and violent. It's meant to make this death of the center feel real and shocking. It's not a gentle fade out anymore. It's a sudden, brutal murder. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the author sets up the victim and the killer. They're not just random people, they're basically stand-ins for huge political forces. The victim is this centrist figure, defending free speech and the way things are. And the assassin, they represent a radicalized left that, in this telling, has decided that some words aren't just words anymore. They're a form of violence that has to be stopped with actual violence.
So, the center has been assassinated. What happens next? Well, the final section of the article is pretty bleak. It's called Riding into the Abyss. And the whole argument wraps up with this really stark metaphor. The alcohol that kept the party going for 300 years, that was America's incredible abundance of resources. But now, the author says, the bar is empty, the alcohol is run out, and when the party's over, so is the peace and cooperation that came with it.
So, in the end, what we have is this very bleak eulogy. It's an argument that the physical, material stuff that held the political consensus together is just gone. And it leaves us, and you, with a really tough question to think about. If we are in an era of scarcity and division, what does the center even look like? Or is it possible to have one at all?